Ladies and gentlemen, happy Sunday, first and foremost, to each and every one of you. And also, I don't usually make videos on a Sunday, but the ball is starting to roll. And I think the ball is rolling away from the ANC at a pace that they could never have imagined. New polling from the DA, although we should mention the DA's polling has historically been incredibly accurate, which I actually commend them for. There's a sort of trend among a lot of political parties where they will have their polling sort of skewed towards them in a bias in how they select the respondents to those polls. And one of the reasons they do that, of course, is so that they can push sort of propaganda messaging to the public of look at how many people are already voting for us. Whereas the DA has always followed a far more, we need this data so that we know what to focus on next, which is incredibly commendable. I give the DA a lot of flack on this channel for a lot of mistakes that I think they make, but when they do good, I will always praise them for that. And clearly, the DA is doing something right. This is incredible news. Just last week, we covered polling that came out from an independent pollster that showed the ANC at 20% in Gauteng. The ANC completely getting decimated in the polls. Now we see that the ANC is actually nationally down at about 30% of the overall vote, so losing 10 percentage points from the last election in 2024. Now, when we actually go through this, it becomes incredibly interesting. You look at the DA polling here, for example, the ANC currently sits at about 29% support among registered voters. This 11% points lower than the 40% that the ANC got. Moreover, it shows the DA is now just 1 percentage point behind the ANC, with John Steenhuisen's DA at 28% of the support, growing by about 6%. The DA polling, just a quick explanation of how it works. They phone about 1,800 representatives from demographically different groups in order to figure out, how are these people going to vote and what exactly is the sort of feeling around different political parties. Just for reference here, Jacob Zuma's Umkhonto weSizwe party, the MKP, they're currently at 11% and the EFF is at 8%. So clearly, MK has come down nationally. Remember, they got almost 15% of the vote nationally last time. The EFF sits at just 8%, so losing another percentage point there. IFP at 3%. So now when we go and we look at the actual metros, we see that the ANC is losing fast. Now, this has been happening and has been a trend for about the last 15 years. Ever since Jacob Zuma came to power, we've seen the ANC support move out of the urban areas, the city areas, and more into the rural areas of the country. And a lot of people have been warning for the last decade or so that the ANC is at risk of becoming a rural party with no control over any of the cities or the metros or the big provinces. And if this holds, the ANC will, in the next local election, they'll be able to hold on to basically nothing. They might end up with Mpumalanga. They might end up with Northwest. And if they're lucky, they might be able to pick up a huge portion of the Eastern Cape. I'm not talking about the provinces, but in terms of overall landscape of what they're ruling in the different metros and areas there. But that's about it, right? There's not going to be much else for them. Everything else will be taken over by the DA. But then when we look actually at the results here, in Joburg, you have the ANC sitting at 23%, 10% lower than what they had in the 2021 municipal elections. The DA stands at 40%, plus 14 percentage points higher now. And I think a lot of this has to do with Helen Zille being potentially floated as the new candidate to run the Johannesburg metro area. You have ActionSA now sitting at just 12%. That's 6 percentage points lower than what they were in the municipal elections of 2021. Now, the interesting thing here for me that I want to highlight with ActionSA is ActionSA's Herman Mashaba, after the massive defeat that they suffered in 2024. If you guys remember, ActionSA came onto the scene and they really burst onto the scene with this massive first ever election showing people were very hot on ActionSA. And Herman Mashaba, as the leader, was one of the people who were touting a race-free South Africa where race would not be a factor. We would look only at merit. He was a champion of capitalism and capitalist gains. He was a fierce opponent of things like BEE and affirmative action, because Herman Mashaba is a businessman. He did grow a business from scratch, so he sort of wanted to be the next DA without being the DA. And people really responded to that message. Then came 2024, and thanks to, and I think this is where Herman Mashaba made his big mistake, thanks to what Herman Mashaba said, or what he saw, what was a massive loss, right? The ActionSA completely tumbled and got nearly none of the votes in the last election. Herman Mashaba identified that as being, he needs to be more like the EFF. He needs to be more like the ANC, because from his perspective, if you don't play the race game, you're not going to get ahead in South African politics, because MK, EFF, ANC all play the race game, and well, the ANC is losing votes, but the EFF and the MK seem to be doing just fine. Instead, I think what ActionSA got wrong is in the last election, thanks to the DA, ANC, MK, and EFF, that was such a hotly contested election that a lot of people who may have wanted to throw their vote towards ActionSA understood the threat that we were under, and so they still voted for the DA. So I don't think they needed to do anything, but it did expose Herman Mashaba for the racist that he is, and as you can see, his racist politics isn't working out for him. I remember watching a BizNews interview just after the election loss, where Herman Mashaba explained why he isn't sitting in Parliament, and he was like, we have work to do, and I'm better suited outside of Parliament where I can actually get this work done. Of course, what he meant was, we need place. I have other places I need to be racist at instead. When you look at the actual provinces, you see that the ANC and Gauteng's two other metros, Tshwane, the ANC is polling at 27%. That's minus 8%. The DA is now at a solid 48%. So the DA could actually stand to win a majority of the vote in Tshwane, which would mean they wouldn't need to go into a coalition with anyone in order to now govern Tshwane. But if you look at the Freedom Front Plus, they're now sitting at 9%, which is insane, because that means that should the DA win, the Freedom Front Plus could very easily side with the DA, and they could have a very strong alliance. The EFF continues to die in Tshwane, so clearly things are not doing well. Then we go to Ekurhuleni. Now, Ekurhuleni is considered to be an ANC flagship, right? This is their prize and joy, or their pride and joy, I guess you should say. But they're down to 19%, while the DA stands at 41% of the vote. The DA is up 13%, the ANC is down 19%, the EFF is down by a 1 percentage point to 12%, and MK Party still sits at 11%. In eThekwini, where we go next, we see the ANC now stands at 14%, that's minus 28%, the DA at 44%, plus 18%, MK at 31%, still holding strong, meaning they're now the second largest party there, and the IFP at 8%. Now, you'll notice that they don't give all of the numbers for all of the political parties, and the DA makes it clear for very small parties, like parties that's getting 1 or 2%, like ActionSA, by the way, in Tshwane is polling at just 2%, but the DA has said this isn't trustworthy because of the margin of error. There is a margin of about 4% either way that these things go, which is actually pretty good for polling in general. In Cape Town, it looks like the DA is going to continue holding on to Cape Town with 61% of the vote there. The ANC sits at 19%, further declining, and Gayton McKenzie's Patriotic Alliance, which is actually a super interesting one, they're up 9%, right? Plus 5 percentage points from their last election, which actually suggests that they're probably taking, Gayton McKenzie isn't so successful at taking DA voters, but it does look like he's very successful at getting sort of stragglers from places like the ANC, places like EFF, places like MK, and they're coming into the Patriotic Alliance, which is still good because it means that those other evil parties are actually being pushed out. Now, all of this is incredible news, and all of this should make us very, very happy. I'll probably have a video, probably tomorrow, where I'll go over what South Africa looks like should the ANC lose, because there are some very interesting stuff there. But this just goes to show that South Africans are sick and tired. They've had enough. Race politics no longer work. You can no longer just blame apartheid and think that South Africans will just be okay with that. They'll just accept that. You're going to have to come with a plan. You're going to have to show South Africans that you're actually working and trying to do something. I think, as I've said in my last video about polling, the ANC has also now basically allowed the country to see what happens when the ANC doesn't get full marks and doesn't get over that halfway point. And it turns out we're not going back to apartheid. And I think a lot of voters are now finally seeing that the ANC was always the problem, because the ANC would like to blame all of these other parties for the failures of the country, except they don't give the other parties anything to do. In all the areas where only the ANC has control in government, those are the areas that's falling apart. The parts that are controlled by the Freedom Front, the parts that are controlled by the DA, they're doing just fine, right? They're just going along swimmingly, operating as they should. And while I have disagreements on policy with the DA, and maybe one day we'll discuss that, it's still something that I think just highlights where South Africans are at currently. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of this. I think it's amazing news. We were poised for something good to come out on this beautiful Sunday. So I'd love to read your thoughts, and because it really does help. So if you like what I do and you want more people to have access to it, please consider hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button. It's free after all. You're just helping the channel reach more people. And then massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons and the YouTube channel members. To become a patron or a YouTube channel member, just hit the link in the description down below or the little join button right below this video. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other. Have a wonderful Sunday, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.